When cornered, desperate, or isolated, man reverts to those instincts that aim straight at survival, quick and just. They will always be the trump cards because they are passed on more frequently from one generation to the next than the gentler genes. It's not a morality, but simple math. Among themselves, doves fight as often as hawks. That was a quote from Delia Owens from Where the Crawdads Sing, which is the book that we're going to be discussing today. Welcome to Book and Bitch. My name is Raven Welch, and I'm here with my fantastic co-host.
Aw, thanks. I'm Ginnye.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's our second episode.
It is. We made it to the second one, guys.
We did it.
We
did it. You're welcome.
Yeah, exactly. We've got great insights.
We have such good insights. And we talk about great books. Like today we're talking about Where the Crawdads Sing, like I talked about earlier, which is such a good book.
Oh, yes. It was
so
actually a Hello Sunshine Reese Witherspoon pick.
Yes.
That's how good it was.
Exactly. And I will say that Reese Witherspoon is probably the Southern sister that I never had.
I'm going to go ahead and say she's one of the more perfect human beings out there.
Mm-hmm.
So if Reese liked it, we all like it.
We all should like it. And I'm sorry, it's really hot in the studio right now. We don't have air conditioning in the Pacific Northwest, and it's 87 degrees.
Which doesn't sound that hot, but if you're from the Pacific Northwest, that is hot.
You know it is. So we're going to be drinking water, because we hydrate.
Yeah.
We hydrate up in here.
I almost feel like we should be drinking iced tea in honor of this book.
And Reese Witherspoon.
And Reese
I
Witherspoon.
feel like that's a very Reese Witherspoon.
Yes.
She just loves tea.
Yep.
Just loves iced tea. Okay, well, so first things first, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Book and Bitch Pod. Yes.
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 You got that right.
That's
Yep.
it. That's the one. I'm reading it literally on my computer. And I'm like, why does this not sound right? I just can't get it right.
Nope, that's the one. Go to that place.
All right, where else can they find us, Ginnye?
They can also find us on the website, bookandbitch.com.
Okay, cool. Cool. I feel like last episode we talked a lot about ourselves. And so this one seems to be getting right into the business.
Yes. Well, it makes sense. That was our first one. We were trying to be polite and introduce ourselves.
Yes. Like our mamas taught us.
Yes.
You're never a stranger for long. So yeah, if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and do so, because it's really good.
Yep.
But these episodes, you don't need to have listened to the last one or the first one to really get a good sense of who we are and what we do and what we like.
Exactly.
So.
Or follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and then you can learn more about us.
That's true. Where can we find you on Twitter and Instagram?
You can find me at glcubel_rights. That's rights with a W.
Yes.
And then name is spelled GLCUBEL.
Yes. Fun fact, Ginnye tried to make a nickname a thing, and she wants to go by Ice Cube.
Yeah, because, my last name is Cubel, so I was
Yes.
like Ice Cubel, Ice Cubes. So I tried to get people to call me Ice for a long time. Did not stick. You cannot give yourself a nickname.
You can't give
it never
yourself
works.
No, but if people want to just go ahead and call her Ice Cube
If you
or
want
Cube.
if you want to start calling me Ice, that would
Ice.
be great.
Yeah.
Or Cubed, or Jesse has been calling me Gin and Tonic lately.
Yeah.
I'll go with that too. I'm cool with that.
Gin and Tonic, yes. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Raven_co-op or Coop. I don't have a nickname.
I was about to say, what do you want your nickname to be? This is the chance to make your own nickname.
This is the chance to give myself a nickname. I think Raven is interesting enough.
It's a good strong name.
Yeah, I get enough. I hear enough. I'm like, just call me by my name. That'd be great. There are a lot of people, it's so funny in the world that we live in. Like, people speak so many languages. People are so educated, but it's really hard for people to remember or say my name as Raven Welch. I get a lot of Rachels. I get a lot of like Welshes, or my maiden name is I'll just say it. It's fine. My maiden name is Hathcock, and I got a lot of Hitchcock and Hancock, and I'm like, guys, come on! It's literally spelled right there. It's
you can
right there.
See it.
It's already an awful name to have.
Here's a fun story. So Raven and I used to work together, which is how we met.
Yes.
And whenever she was trying to tell people over the phone what her name was, she used to say Raven like the bird and Welch like the grape juice.
I still have to say that.
I know, and every time I heard it, all I heard was bird juice. And I was like, oh no.
That's my nickname, is bird juice.
Bird juice.
Yes. Bird juice. All right, well, Bird Juice is going to talk about Delia Owens for a little bit. Yeah. She's the author of We Have Always Lived in the Castle. That was last week. See, I told you it was going to happen.
I know. Well, they both start with W's. They've got similar themes. It's fine.
We did. We went for an isolation theme this first recording session.
We didn't mean to, but apparently we like isolation.
And we love it.
Hate people.
I hate people so much.
I do kind of hate people. It's fun.
So Delia Owens was actually born in southern Georgia, which I spent a lot of my life in Georgia, not southern Georgia. I grew up basically in Atlanta. But she grew up in Thomasville, Georgia. And she was outside a lot of her life, very outdoorsy. You would not have known that from reading where the Crawdads Sing. You would have no idea.
Of course not.
Nope. And it was actually her mother that encouraged her to stay outside and would say, go way out yonder where the crawdads sing. So that's where she got it. She got it from her mama.
I thought it was just like a common saying, and that's where she took it from, but I love that even better.
I mean, I have to say, I have never heard where the crawdads sing. Like, I've never heard that phrase used before, and I mean, it might also be I'm from a little bit more north than where, like, crawdads really are. Yeah. So that could be it. But, yeah, it was her mother, and her mother really gave her a love for nature and creatures. So she really got a love for the great outdoors. She spent a lot of times in the mountains of North Carolina. And then she also spent a lot of time in North Carolina in general, which is where the setting of Where the Crawdads Sing is. It's in the Carolina coastal marsh area. Yeah. So she pursued a career in science instead of literature when she went to university. She actually graduated from my alma mater, the University of Georgia.
Snap.
Yeah, with a Bachelor of Science. I didn't know this before. Like, I was like, okay, I'm going to talk about this book. I had no idea.
I love it, though.
But she has a Bachelor of Science in zoology, which is really cool. And she has a PhD in animal behavior. And her and her husband spend a lot of time actually in Africa, in central... I'm gonna butcher it. We all know this is gonna happen, but Central Kalahari in Botswana.
Okay, that sounds right.
Yeah, in the early 1970s, so 1974, where she worked a lot with lions and hyenas, and then also elephants, which is so cool.
Yeah, that does sound so cool.
Yeah, so while her and her husband, Mark Owens, were there, they're both zoologists, basically. Mm-hmm. And biologists. They radio collared and studied 6 lion prides for more than 7 years.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's so cool. And then they also studied, like I said, brown hyenas, who are very elusive, so not a lot of people have gotten to study them. And Delia, during this time, became very fascinated with social groups of mammals, which the social groups are usually made up of females. Because, I mean, kind of think of lions, like the pride, like the male lion would go off on his own.
And there's usually just like one in the pride, and then it's...
Exactly, it's a huge group of females. Which I can tell.
I know, like, I'm already connecting the dots, and I'm like, oh shit, I
get it! So, I lost my place. Which are almost made up of females. They reminded her of the close bonds that she had with her girlfriends, and the strong genetic propensity for female groups in our own species. So that kind of connected the dots in her own mind. Through her research and life in the Kalahari, she co-authored the best-selling, award-winning book, Cry of the Kalahari, which did research on the evolution of social denning in brown hyenas, and it helped her earn her PhD.
Nice.
She, like I said, studied elephants, which also have a usually females stick together in that as well.
Yeah, they have kind of more of a like matriarchal society, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yada yada yada. Let me keep looking through all these things. She conducted research on endangered species in Africa for 23 years. And she published her research results in scientific journals, Nature, Animal Behavior, Journal of what is this word? Mammalogy? I mean, it's mammals.
Study of mammals?
Okay. Yeah, but it's the Journal of the Study of Mammals. Okay. But it's a specific journal name. Yes. If you actually want to look up this journal, I'll just send it to you because I'm not saying it again.
That sounds good. We'll tweet it out to people.
We'll tweet it, yeah. Natural History and others. Her research and conservation work in Africa earned her the Golden Ark Award from Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands and the University of California Award for Excellence. So she's like gotten a lot of awards for her conservation efforts and her research. And her project in Zambia continues to this day and is funded by the Owens Foundation for Wildlife Conservation.
Wow.
Her research on the importance of female grouping in social mammals influenced her fictional writing, where the Crawdads Sing explores the yada yada. We know that, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit.
Oh.
Yeah, and now basically she lives in Idaho, where she spends a lot of time doing conservation for grizzly bears, wolves, and the wetlands in Idaho. And yeah, they mostly spend a lot of time horseback riding and country skiing. And
that seems very Idaho-ish.
I know, very Idaho.
Idahoian? Idaho.
Hoodaho?
Yeah.
What?
I don't know.
But yeah, so that is Delia Owens. Isn't that really cool?
That is really interesting because in the back of my book, there's only about like 5 sentences about her. So there's a lot of things that I missed that I'm glad you talked about.
I know, yeah. It's really short. And even on like Wikipedia, they don't have a lot of stuff about her. I think like actually she was in one thing that it does talk about, which I don't have on here and I closed out of that browser.
Oh, no.
But it talked about how she was in also an ABC special in the 90s that talked about basically the same, like her conservation efforts and stuff like that. So she's a scientist above all, which you get a lot in Where the Crawdads Sing because they talk about the marshlands and all the birds that are there. So it's very interesting to know that like she actually came from a science background first. Mm-hmm. And kind of her writing was secondary. Oh my God, your feet!
Did it scare you?
Yeah, it scared me because I didn't know what it was.
I thought I touched you at first. I was like, oh, sorry.
No, I thought it was some like creepy little.
You looked really appalled.
And then it's not that your feet are like gross or anything. It's just that it came out of nowhere, so I thought there was like a little child underneath the table.
This was not the horror novel.
Oh God, that's terrifying. Okay.
I'll keep my feet under the table.
No. Do what you want. I just won't look them dead in the eye next time. And think that they belong to a creepy dead toddler.
Oh, God.
Because we don't have toddlers in this household.
So, who knows where it came from?
Oh, God. Okay. Anyways.
All right. Now that we got that out of the way.
Yeah, so a brief synopsis of Where the Crawdads Sing is basically this city called Berkeley Cove has lived with the story, legend, lore of the Marsh Girl. And she's basically lived on her own in the middle of the marshes of North Carolina, like by herself, and for as long as they can remember. And then in 1969, one of their prize men of the city.
Yeah, they call him like one of the sons of the city or just like a popular person in
Very
the city.
Popular. The old quarterback of the high school football team. Oh. Didn't really do anything else with his life, but he was amazing somehow. Yeah. He is found dead. And so she is kind of the immediate suspect. Her name is Kaya Clark, also known as Catherine Danielle Clark. Yep. Okay. Catherine Danielle Clark, Kaya. But So she's like the immediate suspect because he's found in like this tower within the marsh. And basically the story kind of jumps through the timeline of her life, starting from that murder and then going back to when she was a child, and like her mother left their family and their father was like this awful alcoholic, and once the mother left, all the older children left, and she was left there like as a...
I think she was 6.
I think she was 6. Yeah, a 6-year-old girl who was basically there with only her alcoholic father, who would sometimes just leave and not come home for a while, or beat her. Yeah, and was known to beat the other members of their family. So she was left alone a lot. She didn't go to school, but she grew up in the marsh and she learned the marsh. And she was sensitive and intelligent. She survived years alone in the marsh. And she called it home, and she found friends in the gulls and the rest of the creatures, and knew the marsh better than anybody else. Eventually becomes a prolific writer and a scientist, and like is taught how to read, obviously before all of that, but she learns how to read.
She wrote the book and then
yeah, exactly, and she learned how to read. And she also there's a figure in her life that kind of is there the entire time, Tate, who is the one that teaches her how to read, and he's he's a big character in the story, which we'll talk about. And he helps her grow and learn how to be her own person, and also learn how to really socialize with other people as well. But is never like... The rest of the town just sees her as the marsh girl, sees her as, they say, like, swamp trash a lot, is a word that they use. And so she has to learn how to be a human without having humans around her very often. And the people that she does kind of flock to are people like Tate, who is also sensitive and intelligent and very much a good influence on her. And then she also finds comfort in... two African American people jump in, and Mabel, who also help her learn things that you need other human beings to learn, which is very interesting. And also that aspect of being African American in the South during that time period is also very interesting. And she's having to kind of come to terms with that, because she's white, but they're African American, and so just coming to terms with how people interact with them, how they interact with her versus how they interact with Tate, who's blonde and white and a male. So all very interesting, but
I've got so many things I want to talk about.
So many things. Okay, so I think that's good enough. I mean, we definitely recommend you read the book. It's a really good it's kind of like a murder mystery, but then also like a coming of age story where it branches topics that aren't approached very often in coming of age stories. Because you often come towards like the idea of nature versus nurture, but what if nature is the one that's nurturing?
Yes.
Bam. Put that on a book cover.
I know, right? Book critic.
Okay, what do you want to talk about first?
Yeah. I was probably going to, kind of jumping off of yours, I think the thing I most appreciated about this book was I think it was a good example of naturalistic writing, but it was interesting because it interwove all these like fictional elements too. So we have the classic naturalist writers like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Annie Dillard, but theirs weren't fiction, they were nonfiction. And I think this book does a very good job of interweaving kind of all of those facts with a little bit more imagination, a little bit more poetry, a little bit more, what I want to say, like humanness to it.
Right.
Is humanness the word?
No, I mean, we know. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. So I think that's what I appreciate about it most, because it was informational in a lot of ways. Like some of the like facts and like theories behind animal behavior. I'm like, oh wow, like I didn't think of that, but it makes sense.
The interesting thing is it's not just like coming at you as like exposition, like, oh, this is why this happens that way. It's Kai's way of interpreting something that a human does, and saying like, well, this is what a fox does. This is what this is what a firefly does. Yep. So she's relating what she's learning out into the marsh, and she's having to interpret it to humans because there's nobody there to help her do that.
Yep, exactly.
Teach her that as like a human. Yeah, no, it's so interesting, and that's kind of, I mean, that shapes the entire novel, just her life in the marsh.
Yeah, because even though she has these outside human figures that kind of like teach and guide her, like Tate and Jumpin' and Mabel, and even, you know, her mother and father to an extent, a lot of
Jody.
Yeah. I forgot about Jody. Poor Jody.
No, yeah, poor Jody.
Oops.
I forgot that he's actually alive. Like, I was reading the book, and then I was like, when does he die? Because I was reading it the second time through, because I read it before we had decided to read it for the podcast. So I was like, he dies eventually. I don't remember when. Poor Jody.
But Jody, I think...
Sweet baby.
Yeah. Jody lives all the way through the end of the book.
Yeah. He's at the trial and everything.
Yep. Exactly.
It's such a cool thing. I mean, she really does have to, there's this entire theme of isolation, but it's very different than We've Always Lived in the Castle, which we just talked about. Yeah. But it's different because she's not the one making the choice.
Yes. We Have Always Lived in the Castle was like self-imposed isolation. Yeah. And I think Kaya's situation is more like she wants to interact with people. She wants to have a community. She wants to have a family.
Right.
But the few times that she's reached out, she's been rebuffed, and that, makes her...
Right, exactly. It keeps her isolated a little bit further because she ultimately, like, the times where she's in town and they call her swamp trash and they, like, don't want her to interact with people, I think there's a moment where she's out with her father and this little girl comes up to her and talks to her, but her mother comes up and is like, don't touch her.
Yeah.
Did she hurt you? Or something like that.
Yeah, and then, people start coming out of the stores and they're like, what's going on?
What happened? Did she hurt little Maybelline or whatever?
Becky,
I don't know.
Maybelline.
I don't know. I was like, that has to be her name. Stupid Maybelline. And she wasn't even the one interacting with this girl. This girl came up to her, and then the people the adults are the ones that are kind of like creating what the world thinks of her versus her being able to
express what she is to the world.
Exactly. Which is also really sad. The other thing is one of the big things is that she doesn't go to school.
No, she went that one time.
She goes once.
I think it was all the kids laughed at her for not knowing how to spell dog.
Yeah, she spelt it, but she spelled G-O-D.
Yeah, which is interesting. I wonder
if maybe she was undiagnosed dyslexic, and I wonder if Delia Owens was trying to convey that.
That's what I was wondering. I was like, is there symbolism between her spelling out God versus spelling out dog? Or I might be overthinking it.
I have no idea, but that's a really good question because, they don't approach... Okay, so they approach... they have a Bible, right? And in the Bible, all their names are written in it. And when they learn... So I was really confused about whether that was... Is it an actual Bible? Or is it just kind of like a ledger that has like a family tree in it?
Well, there's not a lot of religious overtones in this.
No, yeah, not at all.
The only time that you really talk about religion is in relation to Mabel, who I think is active in her church.
Yes, and then also, so Mabel's active in her church, and Mabel is African American. Mm-hmm. While she also talks about how there's another woman whose husband is the preacher in the local church, in the local white church.
Yeah.
And she doesn't extend a helping hand to Kaya, while Mabel always did and always helped. And
yep.
That was really the only time, because they also talked about how many churches are in the area, and there were a ton, but not a single one ever went out to the people in the marsh and tried to help any of them. They only called them white trash, and it was a symbol, a status symbol that they belonged to the church.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go ahead and say the Bible is probably just a family ledger.
Yeah, but it's interesting that she called it a Bible.
Yeah, because I think that was a common practice, though, is that you had a family Bible and you wrote all the names in it and you passed it down to the next generation. They wrote all their names in it, and then you keep passing it down.
I would like to know where the Hathcock family Bible is.
You should complain if there
I'm
isn't
gonna complain if we don't have a Bible.
Yeah, call your mom right now.
Mom,
where's my Bible?
Where's my Bible at?
With my name.
With my name and all my family's names. And I'm going to put my name in it. So, I forgot. Oh, right. That she didn't go to school. And that's like a big kind of that's just kind of a big thing in the entire story, because how does she learn? She becomes like this very well-educated person, and that's mostly because of her relationship with Tate, for the most part, and then her own drive.
Yes. I would almost say she learned everything she knew from her environment, from the marsh, and from studying it that way versus the traditional education of you go to school, somebody teaches you something, you retain it, you go off in the world. Hers was more of a naturalistic
and she learned what she needed to learn in order to be successful in what she wanted to know about. Because, I mean, so Tate was kind of like a bridge between being just a swamp trash, I'll say, and then being the marsh girl at the end, who is a writer and has multiple published books, and
this almost famous ecologist in the area and a conservation activist.
Right, exactly.
Yep. I would almost say Tate is the point between where her knowledge existed for survival and where her knowledge became so much more than that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because he taught her to read, and then after that would bring her, like, textbooks on, like, biology and ecology.
Exactly. But then he also, because I feel like if there's, like, a moment where Tate brings her, like, poetry, kind of like when their relationship also kind of grows from just him being kind of, I mean, they probably always loved each other, but there's kind of a moment where it goes from being solely really educational to being slightly more romantic, and that's when he opens it up to poetry.
Yes.
And so I think the poetry really kind of also brings her learning from something that's survival to something that is more artistic and yes.
I completely agree. I think so there's poems sprinkled throughout the book just from various different poets, including a local one named Amanda Hamilton.
Yes.
And I think the poetry is kind of that bridge between her naturalistic learning and kind of more of her, like, learning how to interact with people and how to be a human.
Human. Exactly. Yeah. I was going to say that too, because it's like throughout the book too, you have all these, like, she's constantly relating things that animals do to the humans, but it's really when she starts learning poetry and reading more poetry, and the poetry starts to come up more throughout the book, that she starts to become slightly more like human almost.
And it's more mature too. She's using and later on she's using the poems to relate how she feels about more complex emotions and not just like, you know, survival and, you know, anger and sadness. The poems start to become more a way to express more complex emotions, more human emotions.
Right. Exactly. So, let's talk about her more human emotions a little bit. So when her mother first leaves, the book is a lot about kind of her almost fictional relationship with her mother. Like, she doesn't remember a lot of what happened with her mother, but everything kind of relates back to, I remember when my mother made this in the kitchen, and like when my mother would sing, and when my mother would paint her nails, and things like that. So what was your take kind of on her relationship with her mother and kind of where that ended up?
Yeah, it was almost a little bit like she fixated on the idea of her mother. Like, a lot of the story is about how she felt like her life would be different or her life would be better if her mother had been there.
Or come back. Like, she's just constantly waiting for her mother to come back. And I think that's, like, a big thing that she ends up... I feel like a lot of the things that she does is with the idea that, okay, my mom's going to come back any moment now.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's also those scenes where she's like, I have to keep the kitchen in order, or I can't get rid of this because if my mom comes back, she'll be upset that it's gone.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But I think, so a lot of her psyche, I think, is based around that idea of having a mother. And so she relates a lot of her experiences back to
what her mother even, like, kind of said once.
Yep.
Really.
Exactly. Or just those, like, snippets of memories. And what I found really interesting about the book, too, is there's such an emphasis on female relationships. But Kaya doesn't have that many female relationships. It's just Mabel,
only
really.
has Mabel. And I mean, there are other people, like, in the grocery store. But she'll fixate on female relationships. Because when eventually these kids that are close to her age, including Chase Andrews, who is the one that dies, they come onto her beach and she sees them and she just wants to kind of be a part of what they have.
Yep.
And she's trying to come to terms with, throughout the book, kind of her own, like, clan. Like, is she going to ever have those relationships with women? Because she also has, like, she has sisters and she has siblings who leave and they don't come back. And her mother had always said, like, you have to have a group of women to be friends with, but then she never does.
Yeah, exactly. And I always thought that was really interesting because it comes up so often throughout the book, but you never see it, like, come to fruition almost. Like, all of her relationships are mostly with men. And the men tend to leave and then come back and then leave again and then come back, and it's inconsistent.
Right, exactly. And then a lot of kind of how she's coming to terms. I think that if she tried to be friends with a woman at a certain point, it would not go well. Like, I don't think she could at that point because she's just never experienced it.
Yeah, there's a certain sort of, what do I want to say? Like, social conditioning.
Yeah,
that goes along with being friends, with women, or I would say even anyone.
Yeah, anyone for sure.
When you've grown up without that, it makes it just, like, that much harder to reach out and be friends with somebody and have them accept you.
Okay, here's the other thing. I don't think she has friends, period.
Well, that's true. She has
a love interest with Tate. I feel like that was solely just a love interest with Tate and with Chase. Yeah. Those were a means to an end almost, even though with Tate it was always like romantic. Chase was, I think, a means to an end.
Yeah, he was just
she needed to get her dick wet a little bit,
and then he was there.
And it didn't work out in any real good way. And then I always saw Jumpin' and Mabel as, like, her surrogate parents.
Yes, because she does make a reference, because I think she gives Jumpin' a copy of her book at one point, and he displays it in, like, his window, and she's like, he did it like a proud pa would.
Right, exactly.
And it's like he's the father figure in her life after her father takes off.
Right, exactly. And then aside from that, I mean, she has Jody, who's her brother, and, like, she only knows siblings, really, and she just never really had any friends, because I think that's kind of Delia Owens putting it on the village. Like, the village could have befriended her, but they didn't, and so she grew up without any friends.
Yep, exactly. Well, I don't know if I should say it. I think it might spoil it.
But I could always cut it out. What are you going to
I was thinking, well, at the end when she's on trial for the murder, her lawyer even says that in his closing statements. He's like, you all had the chance to reach out to her. You all had the chance to, like, bring her into the flock and, like, help raise her, and you didn't. You pushed her away, and now you're punishing her for that.
Right, exactly. And that definitely, I mean, that just in general is kind of what you see, because I feel like, and they bring a lot of people into the courtroom, and there are people that vouch for her or vouch against her in the trial, and so I think that kind of shows how the village is kind of trying to come to terms with this girl who was just a little girl and they excluded her, and now they're having to come to terms with that, where some of them are like, they don't want to, it's like they don't want to come to terms with their sin, so they're trying to ignore it, while others are trying to rectify it, which, again, sin.
Yeah, exactly.
This book is oddly spiritual, but not at all.
Well, it's really interesting too, after they, like, I don't know if that's going to spoil it either. That might spoil it. But it's like the village has this conflicting, like, viewpoint. Like, they want to convict her, and at the same time, they feel guilty for it.
Right,
so they're, like, going back and forth with it. And I think on the surface, they're like, yeah, we should convict her. But it's like, deep down inside, they're like, oh, maybe, this is our fault. Or maybe we're being prejudiced. And
right, exactly. Which brings me to the other part, because this book doesn't delve too deep into racial issues. However, there is some moments, because Jumpin' and Mabel are African American, like I've said. Kaya is white, and she's also described as very beautiful.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering if, like, during the trial, like, how exactly does that play a part into how she's taken care of? Because I would feel if it was literally, I mean, like, coming from a very southern area, like, I remember people telling me that they would rather be poor and white than to be African American during that time. And it's like, is that kind of the idea that Delia Owens is trying to show? That, like, yes, I mean, they had a lot of evidence against her. Was she convicted? Was she not? I'm not going to tell you right here. No. But her skin color and the fact that she's beautiful really does play a part in, I think, how the townsfolk, I don't know. Barclay Covians, I don't know.
Barclay Covians. I like that better.
Okay, Covians. Let's talk about them. How they treat her during the trial, even. Because she's, at this point, she's clean. She's, I mean, she has I think at that point, she's already published a couple of her books, so she has running water, finally.
Yes,
which is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
So, just how they see her versus, I mean, it's kind of like in To Kill a Mockingbird, how that trial is portrayed versus how this trial is portrayed.
Exactly. That was one of my big things too, is they often describe her as very beautiful, very, like, shapely. They're always
the curves of a woman. Yeah. Like, it's very odd.
They're always describing, I shouldn't say they, it's Delia Owens.
Yeah.
is always describing, like, what outfit she's wearing. And I'm like, what if she had been, like, not pretty? What if she had been, like, disfigured in some way? Or, you know, she's been living out in the marsh with no running water. Maybe no, like...
I mean, you would imagine someone... And, I mean, this is very... I don't know what word I'm trying to say. But you would imagine that someone that doesn't have running water and probably doesn't use a brush very often, or she didn't change her clothes.
Yeah, or even, like, basic items like soap. Like, they were talking about how she was always scraping things together just to buy, like, grits. Would soap be a high priority for you at that point?
Absolutely not, yeah.
So I just think it's interesting, because I'm like, what if she hadn't been beautiful? Would things have been even worse for her?
Well, and I'm wondering if that's why kind of her, like, the way that Delia Owens portrays how the villagers, whatever, see her changes slightly in the trial, because she's grown up. She is beautiful now. She is clean. She is well educated. And now that makes a difference in how they are viewing this woman that they have considered to be swamp trash this entire time.
Yeah.
And now they're feeling guilty about feeling that way about her, when it's like, well, because you felt that way about her has turned her into this.
Yeah, exactly. You impose that idea on her, and that's what she became. And she grew out of it. And yes,
she used that isolation to become something else. But it all would have been different, I think, if she hadn't have found... And actually, that's a good question. Do you think her life would have been different if she didn't have, like, Tate or Mabel or Jumpin'? Like, how do you think it would have been?
Yeah, I don't know if she would have survived, to be honest. Because
probably not.
Jumpin's the reason that she was able to make an income for herself, because she would take mussels and oysters and then barter with him for things.
Right, which bartering even is a very human concept. Yes. So I'm wondering if she would have found a different way, if she would have been even more, like, primal.
Yeah.
If she hadn't have had to do that, if she had I mean, her father was there. I mean, I guess he had just left around the time.
Yeah, I don't know how long he was there in her life, or, like, what age he actually left.
I think he left at like 8.
But by that time, she had been kind of socialized enough that she knew, like, you go to the grocery store for food, and to buy things at the grocery store, I need money. How do I get money? Whereas maybe if she hadn't had that exposure before, it'd be like, well, I'm eating mussels now, I'm eating oysters, I'm eating whatever I find out in the marsh.
Yep,
catfish.
exactly.
Do they have catfish there?
I'm sure they do. Yeah. But, let's talk about Chase.
Oh, Chase.
Let's talk about Chase.
Are we talking about how much we hate Chase?
We can talk about how much we hate Chase.
Yes.
So, like we said, Chase he's a romantic interest in the story for Kaya. And basically, the first time we see Chase is when they're kids, and he almost runs her over with a bike.
Yep.
And he almost runs her over with a bike, and then he almost runs over, like, a nice white woman.
Yep.
An older white woman. And she's telling him, I think it might actually be the church person. No, it wasn't. I don't think it was.
I can't
but
remember.
he almost runs her over. And she's like, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? And he's like, I'm sorry, that little girl just came out of nowhere, and I had to dodge her. And she's like, don't put your sins on anybody else or whatever.
Yeah, I'm going to go tell your parents.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's really the first time we ever come into contact with him. And then she sees him at school, and he doesn't even acknowledge that she exists.
Nope.
And it isn't until she's a woman. And
when she's pretty.
Yep. That he notices her, and it's like this whole idea that he wants to, like, tame something wild. And,
yes,
which I hate that whole connotation with, like, women and taming something. A man has to tame a wild woman and yada yada. It's just overdone.
Yeah,
but I mean, it works out in the end.
But it's a very stereotypical character, I think, because he's like the high school jock. He was popular.
His parents owned a nice business in town, so everybody knew them.
And then even after he graduated, he just hung around and, like, kind of, what do I want to say, kept riding that popularity wave that he was on. And
that's exactly right. And he's also, like, a ladies' man.
Yes.
But it turned, like, that, like, ladies' man notion is something that is always so frustrating because everybody knew. So when he was with Kaya, it is well known throughout town that he's also hanging around with other women and courting other women at the same time. And he won't take her to, like, meet his friends. He won't take her to meet any of his family, which is obviously red fucking flag, right? Kaya. Well, red fucking flag.
The time, it's, like, around Christmas, and she asks if she can, like, come to Christmas dinner and meet his family, and he's like, no, you wouldn't like it.
You would hate that.
My aunts are there, and they talk a lot. No, it's better if you stay here.
We wouldn't go hang out with them anyways.
When we're married.
Yeah. So, everybody knows that he's kind of, like, slumming around, but nobody puts it against his character.
No, he's still the popular jock, son of the city, son of the town, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, exactly. And he eventually marries a girl in the town. I think her name is, like, Pearl
Her
or
name
something.
is Pearl, and she always wears pearls.
Her name Pearl Maybelline.
Yeah. Pearl Maybelline.
Pearl Maybelline Walker. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's it. That just made
I forget what her real name is.
Yeah, no, but it is Pearl.
It is Pearl, because Kaya refers to her as always wears pearls.
Yeah.
Because she has names for the villagers that she doesn't know their names for.
I think one of them is, like, Fat Face.
Yeah. There's one of them, I forget what all the names were. Always wears pearls, like, one of them has brown ponytail or something.
And the other one is, like, red fat face.
Oh, no.
I was always, every time that came up, I was like, Kaya, you bitch.
Damn. Call people out.
You don't wash your face, so.
Yeah.
I mean, but they called her, like, Marsh Girl.
Yeah,
so, I mean, she had the right.
Yeah, it was reciprocal.
Mm-hmm. So, but Chase, I think that he ends up becoming this big kind of mirror for her father, because in the end he kind of takes on that abusive, very angry, frustrated, because her dad was, like, really frustrated with kind of how his life turned out. He thought he was going to be better than what he was. He wasn't.
Yeah.
And he ends up getting injured in the war, and he kind of just takes all that frustration out on his family. And so, kind of Chase ends up doing a similar thing, but he has this beautiful, perfect life in the city, or in the town, and then with Kaya, it's not the same. And I always felt, I mean, I wanted to feel bad for Kaya in those moments, but I think when she started this relationship with Chase, she did not, I mean, she didn't feel like she wanted any romantic feelings for him. It was a means to an end, kind of in the same way that he felt for her, I think.
Yeah, I think the way I read their relationship is that she just wanted human interaction. She didn't care about love. She didn't really care about the connection. She just wanted another human there, basically. And he was that human for him, it was
almost
another
status symbol, right?
Yeah, because he wanted to be the first person that bedded the Marsh girl.
Exactly.
Yep,
what a fucking creep douche.
So that's why we hate Chase Andrews.
We hate Chase Andrews, and we're glad he's dead.
Yeah. I'm glad you died.
Glad your death is the first thing we see in the book.
Yep, exactly. So with Chase, I think it was much more like, I want something that I can't have, and that is Kaya.
And it is actually, like, I mean, just the progression of their story is, like, something that all of us kind of, like, end up dealing with, I think. Like there's always a guy, and there's always somebody that's probably, like, too good for him, and ends up sacrificing a little bit of themselves to make him happy. And then he just ends up leaving, and that's kind of, like, what a Chase Andrews story is for all of us. But then there's somebody like Tate who does end up leaving for kind of, like, the same reason that, like, I don't know, Chase Andrews is, like, gaslighting Kaya. Like, Tate stays with her for such a long time, and then he goes to college. And he's, like, he goes to college, and he sees these other girls, and they're so pretty, and, like, there are all these people in all these social interactions, and then he goes home to go see her, and she is obviously wild compared to all of them, and he's like, I can't bring her back to that. There's no way. And so he leaves, and he regrets it every day.
And then he comes back. How he went to university, and then kind of, I don't want to say abandoned Kaya, but...
I mean, he kind of did. He did not tell her that he was never coming back.
Yeah, well, he promised to come back, like, the day...
For the 4th of July or something?
Yeah, the day after, the day of, or somewhere around the 4th of July. And then he got offered... one of his professors offered to, like, take him on a research trip or something, and he accepted...
Yeah.
And didn't make it back, but then he just didn't go back after that to explain.
Well, he did go back a week later, which is when he did... It's all good. I hate those coasters so much. I mean, they're cute, and I love that I got them from somebody, but they're really annoying. But yeah, like, that was when he came back, and he saw her being all wild womany, and was like, I cannot... bring her into my life.
She, like, disappeared into, like, the marsh, and he was like, she isn't going to be comfortable outside of the marsh. This is where she belongs. Right.
Should he have just not told her he wasn't gonna come back? No, absolutely not. That was awful. But I mean, how else do you do that when somebody doesn't have a phone to text them on?
Yeah. What did people do before texting?
Never coming back. Okay, thanks, bye.
Yeah. Ooh, here's a question I had. This is off topic. How did she get mail? Because later on it talks about how she gets, like, all this mail, and she checks the mailbox, you know, like, once a week.
So they have an address, and she has a mailbox, which her mom eventually writes to them when she's a kid. And they still have a mailbox. They still have, a physical address, but she never checked it, like, literally ever.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, maybe the mail carrier just came on foot, or?
Probably. I'm sure he did.
Interesting.
Through rain, sleet, snow, marsh
weather.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. That was a whole tangent, but I don't think that has anything to do with the overarching story. I'm just like,
But a lot of, like, some of the aspects of the story I did have some problems with, because I'm like, she barely knew how to count over 29, and yet at some point she can do advanced chemistry and, like, knows how to do that and can do the advanced, like, calculus that goes with, like, chemistry and physics.
And all the biology and the ecology, and she was reading, like, college textbooks.
Yeah, she went straight from, like, not being able to read to, okay, I'm going to read this college organic chemistry textbook. Yeah. Okay. Maybe. Yeah. I guess it doesn't really matter as long as you know what the words mean at some point. And, like, if you're reading it over and over again, you're going to end up getting it. But I was like, I read those textbooks. I had no idea what they were saying.
Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, it's one thing to read something and memorize it. It's another thing to read something and understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. But I guess she did. And she's super smart. And she's so beautiful. Like, it's all kind of like, of course she's a beautiful marsh lady.
Yeah. I mean, I love Delia Owens, and her life sounds super interesting, but I almost wonder if, because this was her first novel, like, some things were, like, falling into kind of tropes almost.
Yeah, it is very tropey.
There's some things in here where you're like, okay, yeah, like I've read this 1,000 times over. The star
like
quarterback,
the soft, sensitive boy that
Yeah.
takes care of her, that like saves her basically, and it's like, but she then saves herself, and it's like, okay,
ooh, it's almost like a Molly Ringwald story,
it
right?
Is,
like,
yeah. Oh gosh,
I love it. I do love Molly Ringwald though.
It is a really good book though. Like I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it, and I think I love Kaya's character because I mean she says that all the time, where she's like, I didn't try to isolate myself. I wanted to be a part of this community, but they were the ones that kicked me out and like tried to keep me from being with them. And I thought that was just an interesting take on it, because I feel like a lot of stories about isolation it's usually self-inflicted. It's like agoraphobia kind of situations. But hers wasn't like that.
Exactly. And I think with her character too, there's a lot more like naturalistic elements with it too that you don't often see in characters. Like she was very much a part of the swamp. Like, she was the swamp basically, or the marsh. Is there a difference between swamp and marsh?
No, I think they're pretty similar.
Yeah, but that's who she was. She was just part of it. That was her natural habitat. That's where she learned, and that's where she grew up. And
I really liked when like there was when she was a kid and she got lost, and Tate had to like help her go back through the marsh, and she was like, this is the last time I'm ever going to get lost in this marsh.
Yep.
And I was like, that is a really interesting kind of character development, where it's like she had to depend on somebody and she had to put herself out there. And it was a good experience, but she was like, this is the last time that this is ever going to happen to me.
Yeah. It's almost like it made her so uncomfortable to reach out to somebody for help that she was like, I'm not doing this again. I'm going to become completely self-sufficient.
Right. And she was like terrified of how it was going to go, because all her other interactions with other people have just been so negative at that point. That was before I think she was... her and Jumpin' were even friends or knew each other outside of like her relationship with her father, because her father was still around. So either it was her father or the village people. Yeah, village people. They're singing YMCA as she comes into town, and she's terrified.
I mean, it is a terrifying dance.
It's lots so of arm scary. Movement. Too many arm movements and a lot of costumes. But so she only knew those two kind of groups, where it was like, one is if I say something wrong, or if I make too much noise, or if I do anything, he's going to hit me and beat me. Or if I do something that they don't deem to be right, they're going to attack me and hiss at me and yada yada and yell at me. So she hadn't known kindness. So it's like that moment she was like, I never want to rely on another person. But then she ends up being attached to that person, basically, because after that she looks for Tate like every time she goes out in the water with her dad.
And she always makes the note of, well, I'm not going to talk to him, or I'm not going to do anything, but I secretly hope he's out there. And
she wants to watch him, kind of like she wants to watch like all the other creatures in the marsh. Interesting.
Watching.
Putting things together. I mean, I boy watch all the time.
Well, I mean,
most of my own boy. Like, how is he doing that today? What is he doing?
Gotta keep tabs on them.
I mean, I write it down, and that's a very research heavy thing to do. I feel like that's how Delia Owens probably like interacts with most things in her life. It's like you view it from afar, and you make a note, and you remember how they react, so that next time you know what to expect.
It's kind of interesting. That's almost like it's almost a commentary on the author and character relationship, because the author is almost like the ecologist or the naturalist that's observing and documenting things, and the characters are, off doing their own things, and the author's just the vehicle for expressing that. Right.
And, like, the other thing, though, too, is... So, a lot of people see Kaya to be the creature, for the most part, where they want to see her in her natural habitat, but she never lets them. So, she's almost elusive. But every person that she really comes into contact with, she views from afar at first. Except for, really, Jumpin' and Mabel and... Tate. Because Chase she views from afar, and he's the one that comes up to her after a while.
And it's almost she reaches out to those people out of necessity at first.
Absolutely.
Not because she, wants to necessarily.
Yeah, it's for survival.
Yeah, even though she craves that human interaction and she craves having somebody near her, it's, what do I want to say? She's too frightened to initiate that.
Right, exactly. And then it's kind of like with Chase, she's never had that experience with somebody. So because she has never had it, she kind of ends up, it's like she almost becomes obsessed with it. Like she became obsessed with Tate and like watched him from afar. But with Chase at that point, like he comes up to her and he initiates, but nobody's ever done that before for her.
Yes, exactly.
They always try to push her away. And he's a dick and we hate him. So
we do hate him.
We hate him so much. If you like Chase Andrews, get out of here.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's a good threat? Go
Just
away.
Get out of here or we'll push you off of a tower in the middle of a marsh.
Oh, yeah. We'll open the grate.
Open a grate, push you right in, take...
Nobody will ever know.
Yeah, nobody will ever know. I was going to do a spoil.
I know. I almost said something that could have been incriminating.
Yes.
More ways than one.
Yep. I'm not going to do it. What else? Anything else? Yeah, I liked this is going to be a little too much for like the men listening to our podcast maybe, but I did enjoy the parts where she's having to explore being a woman and like when she gets her period and like Tate has to approach it and he's the one that has to be like, well, I gave you pamphlets, and she's like, oh, but like what do I do? And she's like embarrassed. And it's like, how do you know that you're supposed to be embarrassed right now? I guess besides from how Tate is telling you that you're supposed to be embarrassed. Because, like, I'm guessing her mother hadn't approached that subject.
I'm going to guess not since she was 6.
Right.
But that is a really good point because there are several interactions she has with people where she feels embarrassment, shame, guilt. And you're like, how would you know how to feel those?
Yeah, why would you be... How would you be ashamed of your period without knowing? But I guess maybe she was feeling it because she just thought she had a stomach ache and she thought it was diarrhea. So I guess like I would be embarrassed of not knowing literally anything else. And then he was like, oh no, it's probably when you become a woman. And like he's approaching it very awkwardly, and maybe so that also made her feel awkward. Yeah,
maybe she just picked up on kind of the social cues from him and the mirroring and was like, he looks uncomfortable, I should feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. But when she ends up, like before that, when Mabel gives her a bra, she was uncomfortable with that, and it's like, but why though?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I totally get you.
Interesting. And here's another question. How did Tate know she was having her period?
He was like, it just really came out of nowhere.
Yeah,
I feel like well, he is much older than her.
I guess so. But I feel like as a boy, is that really your first thought when you be like, are you okay? Like, are you sick? Did you eat something?
Yeah, exactly. Is this a stomach ache that feels different than any of your other stomach aches? Like, who knows to ask that question?
Yeah.
And I mean...
I feel like if you had no idea, like, what a period or your menstrual cycle was, I feel like if it was happening, you're like, I'm dying. Like, blood is coming out of me. I feel physically sick. Like, I'm dying. That's it.
I'm in a lot of pain in the lower half of my body. And, like, Tate wouldn't have known from experience because his sister was younger than him.
Yes, and he doesn't have a mother.
Right.
Well, he had a mother.
I mean, he had a mother. It was a big... Yeah.
You know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But, so... Yeah, like, I guess those parts don't really make sense.
I guess it just kind of comes back. I think there's a couple of things in the book that were maybe, like, too slick and too easy.
It was put into the book to progress a story and, like, progress her character development in a way that wasn't natural.
Yes, which is interesting because the book is so... Very natural in other areas.
Yeah, it's unnatural in the human aspects of it, but not any of the others. But maybe that's because I don't know birds. I can't poke holes in her bird stories.
That's true. I know nothing about birds or marshland.
Right, marsh people in general.
Herons, eagles, none of it.
Yeah, shells.
Nope, no nothing about shells, tides.
Yeah.
I know very little about boats. I've been in a boat. That's about my extent.
I've been in a boat a couple of times. Let me see. What else? What other aspects of this story do we want to talk about? Is there anything else that you come to mind?
We talked about the poetry, which was a big thing for me.
Yeah, the poetry was really good. I don't want to spoil that part. No. I was about to.
I won't either. It did, in a way, have you ever read Annie Dillard's Pilgrim at Tinker Creek?
No. I'm going to say, if you ever ask me, hey, have you read this book? I think the answer is always going to be no.
So, Annie Dillard's Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, I had to read in high school, actually. And when I read it in high school, I was like, this book is terrible. I hate this. This is torture. Why would you make us read this? But now that I'm older and a little more mature, it is a very good book. It's basically the same premise as like on Walden Pond. Is Annie Dillard is out here, she's just observing nature and writing it down as she sees it. And there's a lot of parts in here that reminded me a lot of Dillard's writing, and especially with like analyzing the insects. Because Dillard does that a lot too. She analyzes the interactions and behaviors of insects and then relates it back to like people sometimes.
Yeah. And this one was really good because a lot of those focus in on the relationship between female bugs and male bugs. And how she then relates that back to kind of what's happening in her life.
And they start to become symbols for things that are happening in her life, and like a way for her to rationalize and explain some of these terrible things that are happening.
Right, exactly. I think that there's a lot that goes on. I think we briefly touched on it, but like how she relates most of the horrible things that are going on in her life to how animals interact with each other, like when a fox leaves its children so that it lives and can continue to procreate.
Yeah.
But
because that's the ultimate end game, is to pass on your genes as much as possible.
Right. And if you like focus on your kids or kits that are dying, you yourself will probably end up dying. So she does that a lot in this book, where a lot of it is kind of related back to those aspects of her life. Never like the good human parts, but the bad human parts that she can't explain it any other way besides, like, because her mother didn't leave because they were dying. She left to protect herself, and it was like a way. I mean, she didn't leave and procreate more. That wasn't what happened.
Yeah, it's almost like her rationalizing what's happening to her as a human in terms of what's happening in nature. It's almost like a self-soothing technique. Like, this is how I'm going to deal with it. This is how I'm going to process it. This is how I'm going to make myself feel better about it.
Right. Because when Jody comes back and he talks to her about their mother, I think that's a way. And she explains that to him, and he's like, well, that's not what's happening.
Yeah.
And he's trying to get her to really face reality, when that's really her way of just being able to. It's like how people split personalities to take care of themselves. Like, that's kind of what she's doing, but with nature, and just like rationalizing how these things have happened.
Yeah, exactly. And she's up before Jody has never had that many people who can rationalize it for her and explain it for her, and
that's true.
Put it into context for her.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah, man, interesting. All this good stuff.
This book. It's so good, even with the little parts that we were like picking holes in. It was so good.
Oh, I know what I wanted to talk about: the timelines. So the timelines for this book are very interesting because it alternates between Kaya's past and the future when Chase dies, and you know they're trying to investigate the murder. And it's really interesting because they start off very spaced out. It starts out with Kaya when she's 6, and then alternates to when she's older, and this murder
1969 versus like 1954 or something.
Yeah, let me see. 1952.
Oh, okay, 1952.
So, starts out 1952, alternates to 1969, and then kind of goes back and forth like that. And then it's interesting because it starts out so far apart, and then as it starts getting closer and closer and closer together, and the timelines like merge.
Yeah, because then it becomes like 1971 when they're like in the trial, and then it's going back to like 1969 when things were happening. Was kind of like the space and time. Yeah. So that is really cool.
It's very interesting. I guess, I don't know. It's probably happened in other books too, but this is maybe the first book where I've like really thought about it, and I'm like, it's interesting because then as it gets closer and closer and closer together, you start picking up on more things that are happening in the present and realizing how they relate back to the past.
Right, exactly. Well, and like the other part of it too is that like we're not getting any of the the aspects of the trial in the beginning at all. So you're almost like, okay, why are they even relating this girl to this trial? Like, and you hear like people say like, oh, it's probably the Marsh girl. And you're like, but why? Like, why is that even thing? Obviously, they're, like, prejudiced. And then it starts coming up, and you, like, see that there are more connections between Chase and Kaya. And then, like, the clues that they start to pick up start to, like, kind of incriminate her a little bit.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it is very interesting the way that they do that. And I feel like it is something that you see a little bit more often in, like, mysteries.
Yeah.
Where they're trying to establish a timeline, but I haven't read any that are specifically like this, where it's like, I do like how it's like 1969, like the present is progressing, and time is progressing when you're going to the present.
As the past is like catching up to it.
Exactly. And the past, it's always catching up.
Yep.
Like it's always trying to catch up. So that is really interesting.
Yeah, and it's a very small section, but they do make a comment at one point where she's read Einstein's theory of relativity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course she has.
I mean, but she talks a little bit about how, time is relative to the observer, and time on top of a mountain is different than time at the bottom of the ocean, and kind of how it's all perspective. And I think that's kind of interesting too in regards to the timeline.
Well, and like think about the timeline, how the characters kind of relate to the timeline too, where it was like Chase was almost kind of becoming her father, which is around the time that the present is moving forward. We're finally getting into like 1970 and 1971, and it's like 1969, and she's relating it back to like she's remembering those times with her father and whatnot, and it's around the time when Jody comes back too.
Oh, it's like a circular time.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. Okay, I never thought of it because I
love it too because there's.
I think at some point I read like it was Einstein and I was like, okay, whatever, and I just kind of like brushed it off. But now it's like, no, it's like seriously, like things are just becoming a little bit more cyclical.
Yeah,
and kind of.
I mean, because that's another theory of time, right? Is everything just repeats itself. It's just one big cycle, and
I was about to say something that would have ruined the book. Damn it!
We can't spoil anything.
Damn this rule that we made for ourselves.
Maybe we could spoil it later.
I'll tell you later. Okay. I'll talk to you specifically about it.
Tell me secretly.
Yes, and anybody that wants to know if I remember when this comes out on August.
Reach out to us. We'll tell you the secret.
Yes, our little secret. Yeah, no, that's really good.
Interesting. Yeah. I didn't even put that together until we talked about it.
I know, and I never put together, like, the timeline even. Like, I was just like, okay, like, obviously one is going to just keep going because
that's kind of interesting, too, because it's catching up, and then it finally meets to a point where it just goes forward.
Yeah, and it's all just kind of, like, moving ahead in twos. Yeah. Interesting.
Very interesting. I love it.
All right. Anything else?
I can't think of anything. I feel like I hit all the things that I was like, oh, I can't wait to talk about this.
I know, me too. Yeah. And we've gotten to talk about it. That's why if you guys are interested in talking to us like while we're reading the book, you should meet us over at Patreon, patreon.com/co-op-the-podcast. And you can join our Discord group where we talk about each of the books that we're reading, and we let people know like when we're reading the books. And so if you want to read it and you want to have that discussion with us, you can do that on Discord. You just have to give us money.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be worth it though. You'll get all kinds of cool content.
Yeah.
Bonus items.
So much shit.
I love it.
I love it too. Okay, so where can they find us? Since this conversation has come to a beautiful cyclical.
I know, we came full circle.
Full circle, beautiful ending. Where can they find us, Ginnye?
So they can find Book and Bitch Podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Book and Bitch Pod. We're also on the web at www.bookandbitch.com.
And it's all written out. Book and Bitch.
Yep, exactly.
Yes.
Full spelling.
Full spelling, A-N-D, Book and Bitch.
Yep. Pod. Exactly.
Yes.
You can also follow us personally if you would like to. I'm on Twitter.
And you should. You really should. I mean, we're amazing in everything.
Exactly. We're almost like supplement to Book and Bitch. You'll get extra, even more content.
Yes.
And fun things.
More book, more bitch.
Yep.
I bitch a lot.
Twice the book, twice the bitch.
Maybe 10 times the bitch.
Ooh. So definitely follow us.
Yes.
You see, I'm on Instagram and Twitter at glcubel_rights. That's GLCUBEL_WRITES.
What if it was actually GLCUBELUNDERSCORE? Right.
Oh, it took
Like,
me a full minute. I was like, what is she spelling?
What is she even spelling? You're like, let me spell it out in my
Underscores.
head. Underscores.
Don't spell out. I don't even know if
It's
you
just
can
an
make a
underscore.
handle that long.
I don't think you can. I do not think it's possible.
I
don't think
Instagram and
Twitter
Twitter
lets you.
like,
Yeah.
no, please
They're
stop.
like, shut it down.
Please stop.
Shut it down. All right, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Raven_co-op or coop. It's RAVEN_COOP. And yeah, if you liked this episode and you like everything that we're doing over here at Book and Bitch, leave us a review and tell us what you love about our podcast. And we will read every single one and we will keep them in our hearts forever.
Oh, you'll make our day, our
Yes.
week, our month.
A month.
You'll make
for
our
sure.
lifetime.
A year. Yeah. A millennia. And then it all
we'll
becomes
never
cyclical.
forget it.
And we'll repeat
remember.
them. Yes. Every couple of years, it'll
Yeah.
just be a cyclical kind of thing. All right. So, final quote from Where the Crawdads Sing. I was about to say, we have always lived in the castle.
I know. It's hard.
It's so hard. Okay. Final quote. As night fell, Tate walked back toward the shack. But when he reached the lagoon, he stopped under the deep canopy and watched hundreds of fireflies beckoning far into the dark reaches of the marsh, way out yonder, where the crawdads sing. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.